Welcome back to Art Stream with Trey Gallaher. Tonight will be hopefully the last of a creature design we've been working with for the last couple episodes. If you joined us last time, we worked up this little guy here, which was done after a head study with this guy. So we had sort of taken this design working off of a skeletal structure and brought it into the 3/4 view, full body. So that was after working from the 3/4 rough head concept sketch into the 3/4 full body, which is now more realized. I think the goal now is to, the last thing I want to do is I want to step back to this 3/4 head view, and I want to do a more completed looking drawing over the top after having now kind of seen it realized with the body attached. This is a good concept, and there are things I do like about this, but I feel like this is my more finalized design. I like the head position, I like the ears up, I like the face having a little more contour to it, not quite as husky, maybe a little bit more finesse, a little bit narrower in the bridge of the nose and in the muzzle. But I think I'd like to see this more of a completed head back now onto the initial concept sketch to give it a little bit more of a final version, or at least this version, to a more complete. I like things about this too, but I like what's happening here, and I at least want to see this taken to a little bit more of a finished larger. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to go ahead and work this up into a more finished version here. So that's where we will begin. I'll be keeping this off screen here. And then I'm going to go ahead and tape up another sheet of paper over the top. I'm also going to be working in one of my favorite sort of finalizing drawing tools, which is the Prismacolor. Prismacolor pencil makes a real nice finish line that is a little bit workable with eraser if need be, but also gives us a more full value range that, say, graphite doesn't. And I'm looking for something strictly in Prismacolor. It also scans very nicely and can be used to work up maybe color renderings over the top. And maybe at a later date I'll revisit this in color and maybe work over the top, maybe digitally at some point. But for now I want to finalize my design with a little bit more of a clean line rendering, maybe with a little bit of light and shadow as well. Something similar to maybe what I have here, maybe with just a little bit more light and shadow. This is what we're calling Weird Cat for now. So I'm going to go ahead and attach another piece of paper back over the top here. And get myself a nice clean sheet. Again, I'm working with marker paper over the top, which in addition to working with markers actually works great with this Prismacolor. Prismacolor black. So I'm going to go ahead and tape these two together. up here at the top. And I think I'm going to maybe slide up just a little bit because I might need a little bit more room for the ears. Those ears on this cat are considerably higher, so I think on this final rendering I'm going to give myself a little bit more room. So you can kind of see here that I'm coming up about 1/2 inch just to give myself a little bit more room. Okay. I'm also going to tape it here at the bottom instead of going around the front. Again, I like to tape in sort of 2 places. Okay. I'm going to be getting into some texturing, and I'm only going to do the front view. I suppose once I complete this view, I could always go back and complete a front view and a side view, but I think for now, I'm just going to do the 3/4 tonight because that's the one that kind of goes as a companion with the 3/4 body. So this is where we'll start. And again, I'm working with the Prismacolor black. I have my sort of eraser here nearby if I need it. And I'm going to work up. By the way, I suppose if you're really concerned about it, or if you did not have an overdrawing like this, you could feasibly work in graphite. Prismacolor does work with light graphite, but if you press too hard with your graphite, actually the Prismacolor, being oil-based, does not get good tooth over the top of that graphite. So you have to be careful about that sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and lightly start in, kind of as I always would. Not really much different in that respect. Just making sure I'm kind of squared up here. Again, if you're joining us, thanks for coming back. This is episode 7, and the last I'm going to do on this particular creature design. I've done a number now. I think I'm up to, like, this might be the 5th one on this design, but I did want to show a little bit of the process. I apologize if I sound like I'm kind of talking quietly, but it is kind of late for those of you that are out here at wee hours of the night, which is when I seem to be getting around to getting this stream done. Us art dads, as I like to call us, are doing this late at night after the kiddo's gone to sleep, and I have a little quiet and a little space to work in. And this seems to be my regular schedule, so I don't know. It wasn't my intention to stream this late, but I think for the foreseeable couple of months, at least, I'll probably be coming in here Sunday nights pretty late. So if you are interested in following, check back and check back Sunday nights, probably sometime after 10 o'clock, which I realize is pretty late for most people, but it'll have to be where I'm going to be for a little while. Again, you can always check my videos out too on Twitch, because they're stored there for, I don't know, 2 weeks or something like that, and then I also bump them over to YouTube. So if you check out my YouTube channel, Trey Gallaher, you can check out any previous posts that I have now archived there. So, all right, so here we go. So I'm looking here, and one of the first things I know that I decided to do just a little bit differently, I'll start in around the nose here, which I really do like the nose of this one a lot. I think it's a little bit larger, and I think if you were this close, it would probably feel about this large. But I did like the sort of scale that I had going here. bit of dimension, maybe a bit of a seam. Sort of finding that top plane. And then I think a lot of this is sort of side curving around there. Some nostril. Kind of got my center line a little bit here. My muzzle got a little bit kind of rounder. And then of course I ended up working quite a bit with the tufts, which I liked a lot, although it gives it a little bit more of that dog, wolf kind of quality, having being a little bit hairier. But both being quadrupeds, I'm sure there's a lot of reason why big cats and dogs actually probably have a very similar frame. But a cat definitely walks different than a dog, so I think there's something unique there. So again, I'm keeping an eye on proportions now that I've adjusted slightly out here in my final 3/4 full body drawing. And I'm working back into this 3/4 view. Again, lots of similarities. Staying pretty light with the pencil at this point. Not going too heavy. But my head on my 3/4 drawing is definitely a little bit smaller, a little more finessed. It gets a little narrower around the muzzle. But also kind of added a little bit of fur and tufts of fur around the jaw. So we come back up here. A little more height to the top of the head. More crown. I'm working with the eye here. The eyes have a little bit more of a cat eye look than yeah, it's a lot narrower. Also have a little bit of this kind of the mustache wrapping around the back. And again, staying light with the Prismacolor. If bringing the eyes in a little closer together here. How's everyone doing out there? Are you guys with me out there? Or am I flying solo? It's pretty late, so I don't blame you if you're not out there. Again, this is not ideal for me at this point, but this is the only time I'm able to do this right now. As I mentioned last week, I got a lot of changes kind of happening in my life right now with work and teaching. So I'm pretty busy and having to get a lot done during normal daylight hours. Alright, so that's good. I'm going to bring the neck a little farther back, not so thick. And the version I have here, I brought the ears up. So those same ears now rotated up, more like they're listening, which I think is a real lifelike quality. I think most creatures like this would probably be pretty aware of their environment. That might be a little high, but the ear probably right over here somewhere, following over to the other side. Coming back down over here, back of the head, which then and I really liked playing up that sort of tufts of hair, almost like spiked hair, in the back of the head. Looks pretty nice. Gives it a little bit of that almost punk rocker kind of feel. Okay, now we got the top of the head coming over here. A little bit of sort of bushiness around the eyes too. Eyebrows. So I imagine the same thing. Kind of bushiness there. Something this hairy is going to have pretty big bushy eyebrows, I think. A little higher pitch on the eye there. All right. So a little bit of correction. It's funny, like each time I draw this thing, I like it better and better. So I think some of these little changes are working their way in. Alright, a little more on this tufts, this goatee here. Watching for little things like tangents, little things that graphically might be tough to explain the alignment of. Tangents or when you get these sort of accidental form edges that share an edge, and then suddenly you're making it visually tough to find the form because it lines up maybe too perfectly. So watching for some tangents. Liking this a lot though. So I have a little bit more of the chest coming down. A little bit of some fur here. Back of the neck probably could be a little higher. Maybe more over here. which I kind of like that, so I think I'm going to back this out a little bit over here. move it out just a smidge. Again, for those of you just joining now, just so you know, this is the drawing I was working off a little bit earlier from an earlier concept, and now working back into more of a completed head study. So little flatter. Bit of a flat spot there. Top of the head. I'm going to bring that ear back just a little bit. And of course I got my little wispy hairs here on out the front. All right, pretty good, pretty good. So now I've got a map, and there's a few other details which I'm going to pull up. Just little things. Things like maybe whiskers, which, you know, I didn't quite get into the whiskers as much over here, but I'm picturing that by seeing this thing a lot closer, you're definitely going to get that, more of those whiskers. So a lot of these are probably starting someplace up in here. It looks like, you know, lions have somewhere around like 3 or 4 rows, you know, starting up here. So, and that's pretty signature of cats, is the whiskers. So I'm going to go ahead and do a set. Up here and kind of use this line as a chance to define the form a little bit. So as I show these whiskers kind of wrapping, it'll give it a little bit more definition. Anybody out there tonight? Chime in. Let me know if you're out there. I'd love to talk to you. See what you're maybe up to tonight. So I'm going to give a little bit of dimension and some shadow of the mouth over the top there. So going in for a little bit of details, mostly for reference. I can always darken things or lighten things as I'm moving forward. But I'm kind of keeping in mind where the major structures are. And then okay. bring the nose back a little bit there on the sides. A little bit of a kind of a slit there, maybe. This nose on this thing's a little bit more dog-like. But as this comes around, I might actually bring the nostril a little wider there. Look a little bit more forward. Back in. I'm going to pull the chest back just a little bit more. So it's more. Okay. Beginning now to come in a little bit darker with what I know is going to be tonally my darkest spots. And when working in this technique, you don't want to press too hard here so that you're breaking the paper down. You don't want to break the paper down. You want the paper to still maintain a nice, smooth, even finish. If you're pressing too hard, you're carving into the paper. You're grooving the paper, and you don't want to do that. So as I'm building up tone, it's about pressure, gradual, and working circles, and building up depth and value gradually. So, like for instance, I know this is going to be pretty dark over here. So without pressing too sharply, I'm slowly building up this tone. It does help to be sharp. I have a couple backups here. I have another one that I might use if I need to go a little bit sharper, but I'm going to try to keep my tones not as dark in the beginning so that I always have that little bit of darkness to go if I want to. This is one of the reasons why working on the smooth marker paper is a better way to go, because it doesn't have as much of a tooth to it. Coming in a little heavier over here, just so I can see it. The smoother paper won't have as much tooth, and therefore it looks a lot finer. So that means if you do want texture, it'll be repetition of mark making. It won't be texture from the paper. So the whole idea is soft, turn your edges. And if you're a painter, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's all about turning your edges. Keeping those values just soft enough that you get a nice form curving away, but with enough contrast as well that you can definitely make out some edges, or where the light is quickly creating a lot of contrast. But so that'd be my tooth, and so the tooth is definitely going to probably be not as dark as the area underneath, so I might put a little more contrast up against that tooth. The tooth itself is probably going to have some shadow, slight form shadow on it a little bit here. Rounding those edges, rounding those edges. A little bit of dimension. Okay. Slowly working How's everybody doing out there? Little bits of these little strands of hair. The hair probably getting a little bit stringier towards the bottom. Again, trying to get that little bit of sort of natural hair. I imagine this would be kind of coarser, but I can always come back in with a little bit more contrast later. But right now, separating major highlights and shadows. Imagine there'll be a little bit more of a lip starting to stick out here. There we go. Now there's lightness and darkness that separates form, and then there's lightness and darkness of things like local color or local value. So I'm also going to work in a little bit of a pattern here, which I also kind of picked up a little bit in the last version. You can see here that I've got a little bit of this kind of tiger stripe, although to be honest with you, I used a warm gray, so it feels kind of orangey, but that's not really my intention. I just wanted something tonally to separate the stripes, so I think when I work with the color versions of this, I may keep the orange. I may try something else. But I do like a little bit of the patterning that's going on here, so I'm going to try to repeat a little bit of that here. You could kind of see in the previous version of this, I wasn't as defined, but it's definitely more defined now. And I like what came out of the last full body sketch. So we're looking at a little bit more some pigmentation, some stripes. Maybe some stripes kind of coming out of here too. A little bit around the muzzle. Gets a little darker down in here. Just giving myself a little bit of a map. Also kind of like how this swoops back up. Some tone here, kind of a little bit of this sort of natural tone around the bridge, around the top of the muzzle there. And let's see, definitely in here, and then maybe a little bit here on either side. A little bit of a stripe down the middle. I imagine things get kind of pinched a little bit over here, down in here, and then again by the time we get to the kind of eyebrow, which should be up a little bit, it should work. Then repeating on the other side a little bit. All right. So what else is going on? So I had a chance to go last week with my family and my son out to the Walt Disney Family Museum, which was fantastic. Had a chance to see the Jungle Book on the big screen, which I had not seen since I was a kid. My favorite Disney movie, Disney animated movie, I should say. It was also the last one that Walt Disney worked on before his passing, so that was kind of interesting. He started it but didn't see its finish, so kind of sad, but it was a real pleasure for me to be able to hang out with my kid and watch a movie that I've watched so many times throughout my childhood. So I'm kind of coming in here with a little bit, first of all, of the local color or tone or value that would represent, I guess, more of the camouflage, the striping, or that kind of thing. Just so I have a little bit of a map. Because in addition to doing light and shadow form shadows, those shadows are going to change their value depending on if they're near camouflage or not. So shadow in a camouflage is going to be darker than a shadow where it's, say, a lighter value of the local. So I do need some relevance of where those things are. So I'm just kind of lightly scumbling here, giving myself a little bit of a direction. It's also maybe the beginnings of a little bit of fur notation, or how furry this is going to be. Could kind of go either way. I could smoothen it out and make it finer, or I could leave it a little bit hairier. So just remember, two different kinds of shadows. There are tone. There's tone in the local pigmentation, and then there's tone in the shadow. One derives form, the other derives pattern. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on that a little bit. So I need a little bit of this form to pop out. So for instance here, I'm going to darken in a little bit to bring that muzzle out. Again, trying to keep an even application of the medium down. It's not about leaving the mark of the artist. In this particular case, in doing a creature design or a concept design, this is about depicting in the most realistic, believable way what a creature like this might look and feel like. So it is not about, I might need to bring this tooth out a little bit farther. It is not about leaving the mark of the artist as a concept designer. The mark of the artist, if anything, is going to be, I think, more in the design itself, not how you render the creature, if that makes sense. The vision of the artist is more in the design of the creature, not in the way that you're rendering it. That's more about maybe the artist, the renderer, the person making the impression of the thing, which you could choose to be heavier handed, I suppose, but I want my design to be clear so that anybody else that has to work with it understands what it's going to look like. Then they can figure out what kind of an impression they want to make of it. So this pass is not about stylistic rendering. It's about delineating forms and making this thing understood by all the people that might at some point use it or do something with it or need to model it or draw it or animate it. They just have to know what those forms are. Nose out just a little bit more. So that's why, again, equal and even application is really important. Kind of mirroring my design here a little bit. Again, at some point I'll probably delineate a little bit more texture, but right now it's just light to dark and okay, I'm not going to get too locked into one area. I think that's another important thing when you're working on something is not to do edge to edge. You tend to change your tonal range as you move. So it's better to move around in bits to keep your tone more equal. So I'm going to bring a little contrast into the eyes. Again, I'm working in small circles. Not scoring the paper, trying not to at least. If I did have to lighten something and I had scored the paper very heavily, then those lines will kind of remain. Even if I lighten the paper with an eraser, even a very fine-tipped eraser, it will have scored, and you will see reverse or negative white lines inside of dark tone areas. So you don't want to go press too hard. Build it up. A little bit of that cat eye there. The eyes have a little bit more of a, somewhere between a cat and a wolf. Oh yeah, so I was talking about seeing The Jungle Book, which was great on the big screen. And of course the Walt Disney Family Museum. It's just amazing. If you ever get a chance to come to San Francisco, a lot of people don't even know that it's there. I think hardcore animation fans and art fans and Disney fans probably figure out that it's there, but a lot of people don't know, and it's amazing. They've got some amazing original drawings. They have an exhibit of the original 9 Old Men. Which is on display, I think, for the next couple months. They have a theater there, and we have some friends that are members, and so they get screening tickets to the amphitheater where they show on the big screen some classic animated films. And so it was Jungle Book last time. Just for reference, I'm also keeping a little bit of some cats, just some stuff off the internet, just for anatomy purposes. Cats, textures. You do need reference. You do need reference to know what something is. So it's not bad to have reference to know what something is supposed to study its construction. But you need to learn it and make it your own. So yeah, at the Disney Museum, they had a really nice exhibit outside of the amphitheater of Glenn Keane original drawings, which was fantastic. I'm losing my voice here. And they had everything from early days up to Treasure Planet, and of course Tangled and Pocahontas and Mulan. Glenn Keane is an amazing animator. Just watching him draw and break down movement in the figure through gesture is just unbelievable, amazing. It's a master at work. Even his little sketches and stuff from sketchbooks and stuff were they had a couple of those there too, and it was neat to see like stuff that he would draw, family members or something like that. and just seeing sort of everyday observations of life, knowing that that mind is in search of movement and studying movement. Many times just kind of scribbly drawings, but the sort of sense of lifelike movement. It's what great animators do. It's not about picture perfect rendering. It's about capturing life as it's happening through movement. Alright, so I'm getting to the back of the neck here, and I'm beginning to pick up a little bit of the sort of pattern here. So there's going to be some tufts of hair here. I think I'm going to start working on a few of these negative shapes. Sort of echoing a little bit of the I guess the muzzle stash, the mustache up here, sort of echoing some of the same kind of repetitive shapes here. It's almost like a second stash, a beard. This is the beard. There's probably an anatomical name for this. I do not know. For cats or animals. The mane. I guess the mane would be sort of here, but this one's a little bit more about shadow back here. Anybody out there tonight? Anybody staying up with us late night? Art dads? So I imagine there's kind of a seam, a little bit of a seam, sort of splitting the head bilaterally. That's sort of the beginning of the pattern, and then sort of mirroring that on either side. So this one's kind of coming up here, and then this splits off again. I gotta kind of keep this straight a little bit here. So there, and then we'll split off a little bit again as we come above the eyebrow. You know, lions have pretty insane eyebrows, actually. The lid, above the lid, is quite a fur patch there. I don't know if I'm going to go quite so heavy there, but something similar. Of course, we got a little bit of tone in there. Definitely. As you're putting fur, you're indicating negative shapes. So for me, there's little bits of darker patches and lighter patches as they begin to kind of echo the growth of the fur. I don't know that I'd quite call this a photo representational drawing. I'm not going for that kind of level of render. But I also have to make sure that I maintain some element of cat. So you can see where this could very easily begin to take on dog-like characteristics. So for me, want to hold on to the cat there a little bit. I have to pull back just a smidgen here. Now this will be form shadow, cast shadow down here. Probably from the edges of... Imagine the chest has probably got a little bit of the pattern repeating itself down here. I was noticing that there's this real kind of swirly, the pattern begins to kind of swirl a lot in animals on their chest. It's like there's almost this overlap. Again, this is a sort of mythological version of Weircat, not any specific cat. More specifically, a Weircat, which a Weircat by definition has elements of dog in it, at least by definition. I was kind of reading up on Weircats a little bit, and there's some elements of they're cats, but they have elements of dogs in them. It's kind of hairier a little bit, maybe more like a dog. A bit more dog-like. Maybe too much. May have to pull this thing back a little bit. A little bit on the back of the head here. Start building up some of these tones. It's slow going, but it's worth it. The gradual, slow control buildup of values to make the form read. I think we need just a little more jaw down here. Otherwise the face is a little too triangular. It's that wolf-like diamond shape. Cats are a little more rounded in their jaws, massive in their jaws. darken in a little bit more here. That nostrils. Come in a little more pressure on the sides here. Clean up just a little bit over here. So you can still see my proportions. Some pistachio back over there. So kind of coming up here and then splitting off over here. Come back just a little bit. Once you get too dark with the Prismacolor, it's going to stain the paper. So you don't want to go too dark until you're fully committed. down a little bit of the it's okay to shade with the Prismacolor in the direction of the hair growth. I mean, it could emphasize the texture simultaneously, just as long as you're not pressing too hard and scoring the paper. So you want to stay light. I'm imagining that some of these stripes get a little closer together and a little clustered towards the spine, so the contrast is greatest sort of along the middle, but a little bit less up here. The head's turning here a little bit, so I need to get a little bit of form shadow, which I think is going to get a little greater. Maybe down here. And there's this sort of edge of chest hair, I guess, the beginnings of chest hair, so I'm going to back off just a little. This is almost like the edge of the nostril coming up a little bit. All right. I'll cast shadow back here. feels pretty good. Got it. That jawline has to be low enough, I think. That's the thing I'm looking for. Building this form of the back of the ear just a little bit, and then this is in front of the ear, sort of gradually. And there's sort of some hairs inside that are starting to This is a little bit of the jaw turning away. A little bit of the side of the face. So there's going to be some value in here, but not pigmentation. I think the stripe pigmentation is a little more fading into the hair. This is more like form. Is probably casting a little bit of a shadow over here. Top. Circles, circles, circles. Take it slow, take it slow. Chin's probably catching a little bit of light. Shadow there. I'm going to switch it up and come back into some darker values here just to get a little pop. Those really spot blacks, those real sense of the inside of the mouth, kind of no light. Which again, try not to score the paper. It's all about, it's one of the reasons, using a Prismacolor is so great, is that it gives you more of a full range of black that graphite doesn't. But still, try not to score. A few silhouette edges for texture. Texture does read in the silhouette also. So you need a few really dark ones just to bring in a little bit of that, make that edge pop. Just a little bit. All right, let's just check back real quick, see how things are going. I hope this isn't too relaxing, though. Thanks for checking in, man of the bird. Right. It's just going to check back again a little bit with the earlier version. This was the sort of earlier concept sketch, now a little more fleshed out. Earlier, later. But let's not forget that I've also got this one, which was the in-between. So if you're joining us late, just so you know where we are, we kind of had an earlier concept sketch for form study, and then we went to more of a 3/4 full body study, and now we're doing sort of detailed of that head, much larger. So this thing's been in the works for a little while. That's where we're at. This will be the last one, I think, though, on this creature. I kind of wanted to take you through the process these last couple episodes, but maybe come back a little bit later and do the color, maybe work with some colors in other future episodes. When I'm doing color for design, I find working digitally is probably the best, just because you can get so much variation so quickly. I mean, that's the beauty of working digitally. Oftentimes, though, even if I work digitally, if I'm doing something that's more of a finished illustration, I might even come back into natural medium just to get those things about the natural medium that are hard to emulate digitally. Just depends on what I'm looking for, who the client is, or if I'm making a work of art, a traditional painting, or if I'm doing a design to be repeated elsewhere. So I'll probably start to fade this thing out a little bit now. I think these tufts of hair back here are going to probably, anything along the spine is probably a little bit more pigmentation. I would never use my finger or anything like that. I know a lot of people may like things like blending stomps, which, depending on what you're after, I suppose a blending stomp could have some advantages, maybe some super smooth skin. But very rarely, honestly. Just do it with the pencil and the paper. When you do use a blending stomp, you're burnishing the paper, you're breaking down the tooth, and it won't take any more pigment. There needs to be a certain amount of tooth just for it to be able to take more pigment. So when you burnish it with a blending stomp or your finger, that's a one-way path. you can't get any more pigment down there. So try to use the pressure of the pencil more than the Man of the Bird, where are you coming from? Nice to talk to you. We're out here on the in California on the West Coast, San Francisco. It's pretty late here. We're gonna wrap this up here pretty quick. All right. Well, this is getting close here, so I think I'm going to wind this one down. I think when finally done with the design like this, it would be a natural to begin to experiment with the color. And maybe in a future episode, again, like I was saying, maybe I'll try that. But this is what I would sort of consider a final design, is that when you have figured out all the parts, figured out the anatomy, and now you are laying it down into something that is definable. You can describe texture, form, attitude, all those things are now very clear to the audience. It is communicating everything necessary to build even further detail. This could become in the form of a model, maquette, but there's enough definitive information that it would be very clear what this thing would be. A full body one could obviously be done, but at least at this point, we are looking at a design, and then some detailing on perhaps the thing that will establish the personality. If this were to say talk or communicate through facial expressions, then there's enough information here to kind of get a feeling for how this thing might move. Further studies might be to do some gestural drawing, some facial expressions, some gestural movement to kind of see what it would look like moving if it were to be animated and come to life in that respect. Sort of the side of the head, so I like the idea that this thing's got seriously bushy eyebrows. little bit of shadow here, casting from the jaw, the muzzle. Need a little bit of a kneaded eraser here. This is when the kneaded eraser is good. You need to lift up a little bit of your hand, maybe leaving some oils. I don't have too much graphite. Unlike graphite, the Prismacolor doesn't do too bad on your hand either if you're working it for a while. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing there is actually from underneath, yeah. Okay. Well, I think I might need just a smidge of lightening up. So as I wrap this up, I think I will sign off this time and say thank you for joining me here. I hope you can come back and catch another episode. Again, if you want to see more about the creation of this creature and where it started and how we got started in this particular method of working, you can check out starting at episode 3. And you can start to see how this maddening process began. You can check out my work on Twitch, Trey Gallaher on Twitch. Trey Gallaher, no spaces. You could also check me out on YouTube, Trey Gallaher, and at Trey Gallaher on Instagram and Twitter. And then, of course, you can always go by the website, which is treygallaher.com. If you want to see more work or see what other kind of stuff I do. This will be on Twitch for a couple of weeks, and then I'll move it over to YouTube, where you can catch some of my older streams. I want to thank you for hanging out. Again, my stream schedule seems to be Sunday night after 9 p.m. At least until further notice. That seems to be when I can get to this. So I apologize if that's later than most, but that's why we have Twitch, and you can always go check it out when's a better time for you. But live seems to be Sunday nights. So I hope I can catch you next time. I'll be starting something new. Try something new. This has been fun, though, watching this thing come alive. And I hope you've enjoyed this process as much as I have. I mean, one of the things I love about designing is sometimes not always knowing what you're going to get until you get to the end. It's kind of like life in that way. So it's kind of fun to watch and see what evolves, what comes out. All right, everybody. Well, I'll catch you guys next time. Have a great evening.